My name is Sophia. At the age of 25, I believed that life would still give me choices. I grew up in a house that looked like a castle, with glittering chandeliers and pompous dinner parties. But behind the velvet curtains, my family was hiding a rotten secret: we were broke. I didn't know that. Not until the day everything changed. I wanted my freedom. I dreamed of a love that would set my soul on fire, that would make my heart beat faster just thinking about it. But my parents had other plans. They sold me out. Yes, they did, as if I were an object at an auction, given to the most powerful and feared man in the country, Jack Monroe. I only knew him by name. Jack Monroe, the billionaire who commanded empires with a nod. A man people spoke of in whispers, as if saying his name out loud could summon him. They said he was ruthless. That he didn't forgive debts. That he would destroy anyone who dared cross his path. And my family? They owed him an old debt going back years, a debt I had no idea existed. When I found out, it was too late. My parents called me into the living room, their eyes downcast, their hands trembling. "It's for everyone's own good," my mother muttered, without the courage to face me. My father just shook his head, as if it were an inevitable sentence. They gave me to him, as payment. I was to be his wife. The wedding day was a blur. There were no flowers, no music. Just a cold contract signed in a marble room. I wore a simple white dress that seemed to mock what I felt inside, a mixture of innocence and fire that I had never explored. Jack was there. Tall, imposing, in a dark suit that swallowed up the light around him. He didn't smile. Didn't say anything beyond what was necessary. His gray eyes pierced me like blades, and I felt a shiver run up my spine, a warmth I couldn't explain. Fear maybe, but there was more. Something burning deep in my chest. Something pulling me towards him, even as I wanted to run. The drive to his mansion was silent. I stared out of the car window, the city lights flashing by like stars running away from me, while my heart pounded uncontrollably. When we arrived, the house was a monster of stone and glass. Cold and grandiose, just like the man who now owned me. He led me into the bedroom. Our bedroom, supposedly. The door closed behind me with a click that echoed like thunder, and I knew there was no turning back. My heart raced. I was alone with him. Jack was standing by the window, his broad back drawn against the dim light coming from the city outside. The air was heavy, impregnated with his scent, something woody, strong, that invaded my senses like a forbidden caress. He didn't turn around immediately. He stood there, motionless, as if he knew I was holding my breath, that my whole body was shaking with anticipation. "You know why you're here," he finally said. His voice deep, a sound that seemed to slide across my skin and lodge deep in my soul. It was a command, not a question. I wanted to answer. I wanted to shout, no, that I didn't deserve this. But my voice got stuck, suffocated by the weight of that moment. He turned then. Slowly. Deliberately. His eyes met mine, and I felt a warmth run up my neck, down my body, as if he could set me on fire with just that look. It was a look that laid me bare. That held me. That said more than any words ever could. "You're mine now," he murmured, taking a step towards me. His every move was controlled, almost predatory, as if I were a flame he wanted to capture in his hands. My body trembled, but I couldn't look away. He stopped a few centimeters from me, so close that I felt the warmth emanating from him. A contrast to the coldness of that room. The coldness he was trying to show. "Don't run away from me," he whispered, leaning in until his warm breath brushed against my ear, sending an electric shock through every corner of me. My heart was beating so loudly that I was sure he could hear it. Feel it. Taste the frantic rhythm he was causing. His fingers touched my chin, firmly, but with a softness that made me hold my breath, forcing me to face him. And there, for an instant, I saw something beyond the ice mask. A glow. A flame that he tried to stifle, but which danced in his eyes like a secret. "You'll learn to want me," he said. and those words fell on me like an oath. A promise that ignited something dangerous inside me. I didn't know what I felt. Fear, yes. Anger, of course. But there was more, a current of desire that I had never known, that grew against my will, pulling me towards him as if he were the air I needed to breathe. He turned away suddenly, as if he had proved his point, and went back to the window, leaving me there, my body hot, my mind at war. That first night didn't end as I had feared. Not yet. But as I watched him in silence, I realized something. Jack Monroe had mocked me. And I didn't know if I could escape him, or if, deep down, my heart was already begging me to stay. Before we begin, a quick note. This video is a work of fiction intended for mature audiences. It contains suggestive themes and passionate storytelling designed for entertainment purposes only. There is no explicit content, violence, or real events depicted here. Viewer discretion is advised. If you're ready for a thrilling romantic tale, sit back and enjoy. It was morning when I opened my eyes, but the room still seemed stuck in the gloom of the night before. The bed was huge, the sheets cold against my skin, and for a moment, I wondered if it had all been a dream, the wedding, his voice, the warmth he left in the air. But then I saw him. Jack was there, on the other side of the room, already dressed in an impeccable suit. His dark hair slightly disheveled, as if he had been up all night. He watched me. His gray eyes fixed on me. And I felt that same chill as last night, as if he could see right through me, right into the fire I was trying to hide. I sat up, pulling the sheet against my chest, as if it could protect me from the weight of that gaze. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, his voice low but carrying something that made me swallow. It wasn't a gentle question. It was a challenge, as if he knew I'd spent the night fighting the thoughts he planted in me. "Not much," I replied, trying to sound firm. But my voice came out shaky, betrayed by the heat rising in my face. He smiled, a small, almost cruel smile that made my heart race even faster. "You'll get used to it," he said, and took a step towards me. Every step he took was a wave of warmth that I couldn't ignore. He stopped at the foot of the bed, so close that I could smell him again. That woody scent that seemed to envelop me, pull me in, hold me. "Get up," he ordered. And there was something in his voice, a veiled promise, that made my legs give in to the command before my mind could protest. I stood up, the sheet falling to the floor, and there I was, vulnerable in front of him. The light dress from the night before still clinging to my body, marking every curve I wanted to hide. He didn't say anything for a moment. Just looked at me, his eyes trailing down my body like a caress I could almost feel on my skin. My body responded before I could stop it. The heat rose up my neck, my chest, until I was burning under that gaze. "You're more dangerous than I thought," he murmured, almost to himself. And I blinked, confused. "Dangerous?" I repeated, my voice hoarse, charged with an emotion I didn't want to name. He took another step, now so close that I could feel the heat of his body. The space between us vibrating with something neither of us could deny. "Yes," he said, leaning in, until his lips were a whisper away from mine. "Because I should hate you, Sophia. You're their daughter. The blood of my enemies. But here I am, wanting to devour you." My heart stopped, then soared, beating so loudly that I was sure he could hear it. I wanted to retreat, to scream, to run away from that flame he was lighting in me. But my feet were stuck to the ground, my whole body drawn to him, as if he were a magnet, and I were a fragment of iron. "Then why don't you?" I asked, the words escaping before I could hold them back, loaded with a challenge I didn't even know I had. He froze, his eyes darkening with something wild, something that made my blood race faster. For a moment, I thought he was going to pull me against him, that he was going to give in to that fire that danced between us. But then he pulled back, as if he'd been burned, and turned his face away. "Because I haven't decided what to do with you yet," he said. His voice cold again but trembling at the edges, betraying what he was trying to hide. I stood there, panting. My body hot. My mind spinning. "You can't keep me like this forever," I said, finding courage somewhere inside me. "Between what you want and what you have planned for my family, you're going to have to choose." He turned back to me quickly, his eyes sparking with a mixture of anger and desire. That made me hold my breath. "Choose," he repeated, advancing until he was a breath away from me again. "Do you think I can't have both? Destroy them and possess you?" His fingers brushed my arm, light as a feather, but enough to send a shock through every nerve in me. I shuddered, unable to hide the effect he had on me. "You're already mine, Sophia," he whispered, his voice sliding over me like a forbidden caress. "And the more you fight, the more I want you." He then walked away, leaving me standing there, my heart racing, my body begging for something I couldn't admit. As he left the room, the door closing behind him, I fell back onto the bed, the air trapped in my lungs. He was right. I was fighting. But not just against him. I was fighting against myself. Against the desire that was growing like a storm. Against the certainty that even though I was his prisoner, a part of me wanted to be captured. And that terrified me more than anything Jack Monroe could do. The days at Jack Monroe's mansion were like living in a fever dream. A place where money bought everything, except the freedom I so desperately wanted. The house was a palace of luxury, with polished marble walls, chandeliers that sparkled like diamonds, and windows that showed a city I could no longer reach. But I wasn't a guest. I was a millionaire's possession. A trophy he had bought with the weight of his power. And my family's debt. And yet, every time he entered the same room as me, the air changed. It became warmer, denser, as if the very money he exuded was nothing compared to the magnetism he carried. That afternoon, I was in the library. A huge space full of expensive books and leather armchairs that smelled of wealth. I tried to distract myself by leafing through some volume, but my mind was elsewhere, stuck on the memory of his touch on my arm, on those words he whispered. "The more you fight, the more I want you." I hated to admit it, but those words had ignited something in me, something that pulsed hot and restless deep in my chest. Then he appeared. The door opened, and there stood Jack, the millionaire who commanded everything with a glance, the man who turned fortunes into weapons and desires into chains. He wore a black shirt, the sleeves folded up to his elbows, revealing strong arms that looked like they were made to hold up the world, or hold me against it. "Looking for a way out in books?" he asked, his deep voice sliding through the air like a caress I could feel on my skin. I lifted my chin, trying to keep my composure. "Looking for a way not to think about you," I retorted. But my voice came out softer than I wanted, almost an invitation. He laughed, a low, dangerous sound that made my heart soar. "That's impossible, Sophia," he said, crossing the space between us with slow steps, each one echoing like a drum in my chest. He stopped next to me, so close that I could feel the heat emanating from him, the expensive perfume that mixed wood and power, a combination that made me dizzy. "You think about me all the time. I can see it in your eyes." He was right. And I hated it. I hated how my body reacted to him. How just being there made my blood run faster, hotter, hungrier. "You think money buys everything, don't you?" I said, trying to regain control. But he just smiled. That smile of someone who knows they've already won. "Money bought you," he replied, leaning in until his face was a whisper away from mine. But it's not money that's making you tremble now. My breath failed me. He was so close, that I could feel the warmth of his lips, almost brushing against mine. A tiny space that seemed to cry out to be filled. I wanted to pull back, but my body leaned towards him. Traitorous. Drawn to that strength he exuded. As if he were a king and I his reluctant queen. His fingers brushed my neck. Light but firm. Tracing a line that made my skin burn. Have you ever thought about what it would be like? He murmured. His gray eyes burning into mine. If I pulled you against me now? If I showed you what this fire between us can do? My heart was beating so hard that I was sure he could hear it. Feel the desperate rhythm it was creating. You wouldn't dare, I whispered. But the words came out weak, charged with a desire I could no longer hide. Oh, I dare, he said, his voice falling like warm silk over me. I dare to make you beg for it, Sophia. And you'd love every second of it. He slid his hand down my shoulder, his fingers dancing over my collarbone, sending waves of warmth that made me close my eyes for a moment. Lost in the sensation. I could imagine it. His arms enveloping me. The weight of his body against mine. The power of that ruthless millionaire. Surrendering to the same desire that consumed me. But then he pulled back, as he always did. Leaving me panting. My body begging for more. Not yet, he said. His eyes darkening with a promise that left me trembling. I want you to come to me first. I want you to choose. Then he turned away, walking out of the library. As if nothing had happened. But I knew the truth. He was teasing me. Challenging me. Playing a game I didn't know if I could win. I fell into the armchair. My legs weak. My heart on fire. He was a millionaire who could buy the world. But what he wanted from me was priceless. And what was worse? A part of me. A wild, hungry part. Wanted to give it to him. I wanted to run after him. I wanted to feel that fire explode. And that scared me. More than all the money and power Jack Monroe carried in his hands. Jack Monroe's mansion was a labyrinth of wealth and secrets. Every corner screaming money. From the polished marble floors to the expensive paintings that hung from the walls. Like trophies from a millionaire who got everything he wanted. But me? I was the prize he wasn't expecting. The fire he didn't know how to control. After that moment in the library, the air between us changed. Every look, every word, every silence seemed charged with an electricity that I could feel on my skin, as if the very luxury around us was watching, waiting to see who would give in first. That evening, he asked me to dinner. It wasn't a request. It was an order, delivered by one of the servants who floated around the house like silent shadows, all paid with Jack's infinite money. I went downstairs, the dress he had ordered falling over my body like a second skin. Black silk. Expensive. Cut to hug every curve I had. When I entered the salon, he was there, standing by the long table, his dark suit shaping his broad shoulders, his gray eyes devouring me before I'd even said a word. Sit down, he said, his deep voice brushing against my senses like a touch I could almost feel. I obeyed. Not out of fear, but because there was something in that order that pulled me in, that made my blood run hotter. The table was covered in expensive dishes, gleaming crystal, food that probably cost more than I could imagine. But I barely touched it. My eyes were locked on him, on that millionaire who turned every gesture into a promise. You look beautiful, he murmured, leaning over the table, his fingers playing with the rim of a wine glass. But I knew you would. Money can buy a lot of things, Sophia, but it doesn't explain what you do to me. I caught my breath, my heart beating so fast that I was sure he could hear it. And what do I do to you? I asked, my voice coming out lower, bolder than I had intended. He smiled. That dangerous smile that made my whole body react, as if he could light a match inside me with a single look. "You make me hungry," he said, his eyes darkening, falling on me like a caress. "Not of food. Not of power. Not of money. Of you." The air grew heavier, the space between us vibrating with a tension I could no longer ignore. I leaned forward, my elbows on the table, my dress sliding a little, revealing the skin of my shoulder. His eyes followed the movement, and I saw the desire shining there, hot, wild, as if he was seconds away from jumping the table and pulling me against him. "Then why don't you do something about it?" I whispered, the words coming out as a challenge, an invitation I could no longer hold back. He stood up slowly, each movement deliberate, like a predator circling its prey. He walked over to me, stopping behind my chair, so close that I felt the warmth of his body against my back. His hands landed on my shoulders, his fingers sliding down the silk of the dress, tracing lines that made my skin burn under the fabric. "Because I want more than that," he murmured, his voice falling warmly on my ear, sending a shiver down my spine and lodging in places I didn't dare name. "I want you begging for me, Sophia. I want you burning as much as I do right now." I turned my face away, my lips a breath away from his. The whole world reduced to that tiny space between us. "What if I'm already burning?" I asked, my voice shaking with desire, anger, everything he was making me feel. He froze, his fingers squeezing my shoulders for an instant, and I saw the battle in his eyes, the ruthless millionaire fighting the man who wanted to surrender. "Then we're in trouble," he said, his voice hoarse, laden with a promise that left me breathless. He leaned closer, his nose brushing my neck, his breath warm against my skin, and I closed my eyes, lost in the sensation, the warmth, the power of that moment. "Have you ever thought about what it would be like," he whispered, his lips so close I could almost taste them. "Me holding you, pulling you against me, showing you what this fire can do?" My whole body responded. A tremor I couldn't hide. A desire that consumed me like a flame licking through paper. But then he pulled back, as always, leaving me panting, my shoulders warm where his fingers had been. "Not yet," he said, turning back to the other side of the table, his eyes fixed on me as if I were the most expensive treasure all his money could never buy. "I want you to come to me, Sophia. I want you to choose to give me everything." He sat down, but dinner was over for me. My heart was pounding uncontrollably, my body begging for him. And I knew the game had changed. Jack Monroe might have all the money in the world, but what he wanted from me was more dangerous, and I was one step away from giving in. I never imagined that my first time would be like this. Not with flowers or soft promises, but with a man like Jack Monroe, a millionaire who turned the world into his playground and made me shiver with a look. After that moment in the library, when he left me burning with his words and his touch, I knew I couldn't run away anymore. His money surrounded me, in the mansion, in the marble walls, the expensive furniture, the power that pulsed in every corner. But what consumed me was him, the heat that grew between us like a storm I couldn't avoid. That night, I was in the bedroom, my heart beating hard against my chest. The light dress I was wearing, a gift from him, bought with his endless fortune, clinging to my body as if I knew what was coming. The door opened. And there he was, Jack. His gray eyes shining with a desire that made me catch my breath. He didn't say anything. Just crossed the space between us, each step echoing like a drum in the silence, until he was so close I could smell his scent, expensive wood, pure power, a promise that enveloped me whole. "Have you ever dreamed of this?" he murmured, his deep voice sliding across my skin like a touch I wanted to feel deeper. I swallowed, the heat rising in my neck, my inner self fighting against the fire he was igniting in me. "I've dreamt of love," I replied, my voice shaky but honest. "Not with a man who bought me." He smiled. That dangerous smile that made my blood run hot, and raised his hand, his fingers brushing my cheek, tracing a slow line down my neck. "Then let me show you that this can be more," he whispered, leaning in until his warm breath danced against my ear. "More than your dreams." My body reacted before my mind could protest. A shudder that gave me away. a sigh that escaped my lips. He pulled me against him, his strong arms wrapping around me as if I were the most expensive treasure all his money could never buy. "You're mine now," he said, his lips brushing my forehead, trailing down to the curve of my neck, each touch sending waves of heat that made me melt against him. I'd never been this close to anyone. Never felt a man like this. And there he was, the millionaire who ran everything, guiding me to a place I'd never known. "Jack," I whispered, my trembling hands going up to his chest, feeling his heart beating hard under his expensive shirt, a rhythm that echoed my own. He froze for a moment, his eyes darkening with something wild. Something that made me want more. "Tell me you want this," he murmured, his fingers sliding down my back, tracing each curve with a reverence that contrasted with the fire in his gaze. "I want it," I said, the word coming out hoarse, charged with a desire I could no longer deny. And then he took me in his arms, carrying me to the bed with a force that stole my breath. He laid me there, his weight hanging over me, his eyes burning into mine as if I were the only desire he'd ever had. "You're so beautiful," he whispered, his hands sliding over my shoulders, down to my arms, each touch igniting sparks that danced across my skin. I arched against him, his heat consuming me, my whole body begging for more, as he guided me, slow, deliberate, as if he wanted me to feel every second of that first time. "Relax," he said, his voice soft but firm, his lips brushing my neck again, down to my shoulder, each kiss of fire that made me shiver. I'd never felt anything like it. The weight of him. The heat. The way he seemed to know exactly how to make me lose control. My hands grabbed his hair, pulling him closer, and he moaned low, a sound that vibrated through my body like a promise. "You'll remember this forever," he whispered, his fingers dancing over me, taking me to a place where fear mixed with ecstasy. Where I was his, and he was mine. When the moment came, it was as if the world stopped. Our bodies so close that there was nothing else between us. The heat exploding in me like a flame I never wanted to extinguish. I gave in. And he held me, the ruthless millionaire surrendering to the same fire that was consuming me. Then I was in his arms, panting, my heart beating wildly. Knowing that my first time wasn't just a moment, it was the start of something bigger. Something that all his money couldn't buy. Something that the two of us had created together, right there, that night. After that night, Jackman Rose Mansion looked different. As if the money that glittered in every corner, from the expensive chandeliers to the polished marble, had taken on a new weight. A warmth that echoed what had happened between us. My first time with him still burned in my memory, on my skin, in every beat of my heart. And I knew that something had changed. The millionaire who bought me with a debt now possessed me in a way that went beyond power or wealth. But the game wasn't over. He still wanted more. And I hated to admit, so did I. That evening, he asked me to dinner. It wasn't an invitation, it was an order, brought by one of the servants who glided through the house like ghosts, paid with Jack's infinite money. I went downstairs, the dress he had ordered falling over my body like a caress. Black silk, cut to hug every curve. An expensive gift that screamed his name. When I entered the salon, he was there, standing by the long table. His dark suit shaping his broad shoulders. His gray eyes devouring me, as if he could feel the heat that still pulsed in me from last night. "Sit down," he said, his deep voice brushing against my senses, the way his fingers had brushed against my skin hours before. I obeyed. Not out of fear, but because there was something in that command that pulled at me. That made my blood run hot and fast. The table was covered in luxury, expensive dishes, sparkling crystal, food worth more than I could dream of. But I barely touched it. My eyes were locked on him. On that millionaire who turned every gesture into a dance of desire. You're different," he murmured, leaning over the table, his fingers playing with the wine glass as if to tease me. "More alive. More mine." My heart raced, heat rising up my neck, my mind returning to the bed. To his weight on me. To the fire he had lit in my soul. "Maybe I am," I replied, my voice coming out low, laden with a boldness I didn't know I had. He smiled, that dangerous smile that made my whole body react, as if he could set me on fire again with a single look. "You liked it, didn't you?" he said, his eyes darkening, falling on me like a promise I wanted him to keep. "The way I made you mine." The air became thick, the space between us vibrating with a tension I knew well now. I leaned forward, my dress sliding a little, revealing the skin of my shoulder. The same skin he had kissed. That he had marked. His eyes followed the movement, and I saw the desire shining there. Hot. Hungry. As if he wanted to pull me over the table and take me right there. "And you?" I asked, whispering the words like a secret. "Did you enjoy surrendering to me?" He rose slowly. Each movement a sensual threat that made me hold my breath. He walked toward me, stopping behind my chair, so close that I felt the heat of his body against my back. His expensive cologne wrapping around me like a golden chain. "I don't surrender," he murmured, his hands resting on my shoulders, fingers sliding over the silk, tracing lines that made my skin burn all over again. "But you make me want to throw it all away. Money. Power. Everything, just to have you like this. Trembling for me." I turned my face, my lips just a breath away from his. The entire world shrinking into that tiny space, begging to be closed. "Then have me," I whispered, my voice trembling with desire, with memories, with everything he made me feel. He froze, his fingers tightening on my shoulders for a moment. And I saw the fire in his eyes, the millionaire battling the man who wanted to devour me. "You're dangerous, Sophia," he said, his voice rough, almost a groan. "More valuable than any fortune I've ever made." He leaned in closer, his nose brushing against my neck, his warm breath on my skin. And I closed my eyes, lost in the sensation, in the heat, in the memory of what we had shared. "Have you ever thought about what it would be like again?" he whispered, his lips so close I could almost taste them. "Me holding you. Pulling you against me. Making you mine again." My whole body responded. A shiver I couldn't hide. A desire that consumed me like a flame that never burned out. But he pulled away, as always, leaving me breathless. My shoulders still warm where he had touched me. "I want more than this now," he said, stepping back to the other side of the table, his eyes locked on me, as if I were the one treasure his money could never truly buy. "I want you to ask for me, Sophia. I want you to give yourself to me, because you can't wait any longer." He sat down. But for me, dinner was over. My heart pounded wildly. My body begged for him. And I knew the game had changed. Because now, I wanted to play too. Days at Jackman, our mansion, had become a whirlwind of heat and promises. Every corner filled with his wealth. The expensive rugs. The priceless paintings. The empire he built with steady hands. But none of it mattered anymore since that first time when he took me in his arms and made me his. The world had changed. The millionaire who bought me over a debt now held me as if I were the greatest treasure his fortune could never reach. And me? I was tired of fighting what I felt, of resisting the fire he ignited in me, of denying the dream I had secretly always had, a love that made me sigh just by thinking of it. It was a hot night, the sky heavy with stars that gleamed like silent witnesses to what was about to happen. I stood on the terrace, the wind playing with my hair, the light dress, another gift from him, paid for with his endless fortune, dancing against my skin like a caress that reminded me of him. Then I heard the footsteps, firm, determined, echoing on the stone like a call my heart already knew by heart. Jack appeared in the doorway, his tall, powerful silhouette against the light, his gray eyes burning with a desire that made me tremble all over. "You're here," he said, his deep voice sliding over me like a touch I wanted to feel forever. "I needed to find you," I replied, my voice low, carrying all the feelings I had been holding back. He crossed the terrace, stopping just a few steps away, the heat of his body pulling me in like a flame I couldn't resist. "Do you still want to run?" he asked, his lips curling into a half-smile that made me melt. "No," I said, stepping toward him, my heart pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. "I want to stay. I want you." His eyes darkened, the air between us exploding with tension I knew all too well now, the same fire that had drawn us together that first night. "You have no idea what you do to me," he murmured, closing the space between us, his hands reaching up to my face, his fingers tracing my skin as if I were too precious to touch. "I can't stay away from you anymore, Sophia. You're my addiction, my everything." My breath faltered, his heat surrounding me, and I leaned into him, feeling his chest against mine, his heartbeat racing just as wildly as my own. "Then don't stay away," I whispered, pulling him closer, my fingers gripping his expensive shirt, feeling the heat of his skin beneath it. "Make me yours again, Jack. Make me sigh for you." He let out a low groan, a sound that vibrated through my body, and then he kissed me, a kiss that was hot, desperate, more than just desire, more than just power. It was love. The love I had dreamed of, the love that made me tremble just thinking about it. His lips moved against mine, his hands sliding down my back, pulling me against him as if he never wanted to let go. "You're my woman," he murmured between kisses, his lips grazing my neck, trailing down to my shoulder. Each touch sparked fires that made me burn, not because of a contract, not because of money, because I love you. My heart stopped, then raced, and I grabbed his hair, pulling him back to me. "And I love you," I replied, my voice husky with emotion, with desire, with everything he made me feel. "You are the husband I dreamed of, Jack. The one who makes me sigh, the one who makes me burn." He lifted me into his arms, the terrace spinning around me, and carried me inside to the room where it had all begun. He laid me down on the bed, his eyes shining with passion and tenderness, his weight over me like a promise I wanted to last forever. "You are more valuable than any fortune," he murmured, his fingers trailing over my face, my neck. Each touch a caress that made me melt. "I would spend my whole life proving that to you." I arched into him, his heat consuming me, and pulled him closer. Our bodies so entwined, we were one. That night, he took me again, not just with desire, but with love, with a devotion that made me sigh aloud, that made me feel every piece of the dream I had carried for so long. He was mine, and I was his, the millionaire who surrendered to me, the woman he could no longer live without. When dawn arrived, I was still in his arms, the silence between us filled with a love that burned hotter than any flame, richer than any fortune. The end.